Alright, in this lesson we'll explore how to rename index labels or columns within our data frame. Let's get our data frame back to its original shape by re-executing our import code. There we have our first three rows. And the first way to do this is with the rename method. I'm actually going to do it on columns first because that's usually the thing that we're going to be renaming. So I'm going to call the rename method directly on my data frame. And like all methods, that requires a pair of parentheses at the end. Let's take a look at our documentation with Shift-Tab. And we can see that there are two primary parameters, index and columns. And this is where I like to write out my parameter name explicitly. So in this case, I'm going to be working with the columns. So I'm going to write that parameter name out with an equal sign and then provide it its argument. And the argument that we can provide here is actually going to be a Python dictionary. So we have to put those curly braces for the dictionary. And the way it works is the key of the dictionary, each key represents an existing column name, and each value represents the new column name that you'd like to give. So for example, if I want to take my year column to the left and I want to rename it to, let's say, release date, I can put a colon here and just write release date. So I'm creating a key value pair within my dictionary. Similarly, if I want to take my box office column and I want to rename it to, let's say, revenue, I just have to put a colon like we do in a typical Python dictionary and then write my new column name in double quotes. And as with regular dictionaries, you can see that we are separating each key value pair with that comma right at the end there, and the entire thing goes within those curly braces. And that is the actual argument that we're giving to the columns parameter of the rename method. Quite a bit to think about there. Now, this method by itself does not modify our original data frame. If we want to make it permanent, the rename method does include an in-place parameter. So I'm going to set that equal to true. And now if I preview my first row with head, you can see that year has been changed to release date and box office has been changed to revenue. Let's talk a little bit about changing index labels now, and it's going to be the exact same process. I'm going to call the rename method on my bond data frame, open my parentheses, and now I'm going to want to provide a dictionary to the index parameter because I want to change values in the index. So index equals dictionaries. And again, the process is the same. We first have to list an index label that currently exists. For example, Dr. No is one of our index labels. And then we put a colon, and then the new value represents what we want to call it. So let's spell it out. Let's make it Dr. No. And let's do a couple others. I'm going to put a comma. That's what you need to do to separate every key value pair in our dictionary. Let's add a space between GoldenEye. So there's my original column, or rather index label, colon, here's my new one, GoldenEye with a space. And if this helps, what you can do is separate these line by line. That's actually legal syntax. You're not going to run into any errors. That usually helps in case you want to break up each combination or each key value pair onto a separate line. So let's add another comma here, and let's do one more. Let's find the index label, the world is not enough, and rename it to best Bond movie ever. Haters are welcome to keep hating. Alright, and again, this operation will not do anything. In fact, if I execute this, I think we're just going to get a sample preview data frame with the results. So let's see what happens here. There we go. You can see that we're actually going to get a sample brand new data frame. In order to make the operation live on our existing data frame, we want to do that in place equals true. And now I can just do Bond IX, let's say the best Bond movie ever, which is our new value for the world is not enough. And now you can see that it does exist, in fact, as a row label in my data frame because we have overwritten it. Now, there's actually another way that we can assign new values to columns, and that's using the columns attribute. And the caveat there is we have to provide all of the new values at one time. We can't just change one thing at a time. We can't pick and choose. So as an example, let's take a look at our top row here. There are all of our columns for reference. And as a reminder, we also have the columns attribute on a data frame, and that's going to give us an array. And what we can actually do is add an equal sign after that columns attribute and assign it a brand new list that's going to represent our new values, our new column values. Now, unfortunately, you can't do something like select a specific column within columns. If you have to do something like that, you have to stick with the rename method. But if you want to apply a different column name across the board, you can just assign a list to the columns attribute and it's going to overwrite them all across. So if you want to keep a column name, you just have to write the name exactly as it currently is. So for example, if I want to change release date to year of release, let's say I want to keep actor and director, I have to write them in the exact order because this is how it's going to replace the values that currently exist as my columns. Let's change the revenue to gross. Let's change the budget to cost. And let's change bond actor salary to salary. So when I execute this, we're not going to see anything immediately. However, when I preview bond below with the head method, we can see that those columns have been changed. The ones that we don't want to change, again, we provided actor and director, so those have been overwritten with the same values, which gives the impression that it didn't change. So you can also use this columns attribute if you want to do kind of a quick and dirty way of changing these things. I usually prefer rename because it keeps that track record of what the columns originally were and what we overwrote each value with. But either option works, and if you're working with the index, the rename method also works for changing those labels to something new as well.